what challenges have you faced in life? And you can pick a small, medium, or large, whatever you're comfortable sharing, because a lot of times we think it's a mountain, right? We look at it, we're like, that is a hugest mountain I can ever imagine. And then you get around it, you get under it, you get over it, and you made it to the other
Mhm.
side.
Mhm.
Is there something that you're comfortable sharing that was tough for you at the time?
Yeah, and you know, every time you get questions like this, I always thought. I mean, a while back, I would think I was like, gosh, I don't know if I'm just blind, but I was like, I lived a kind of a blessed life, right? I mean, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but at the same time, I wasn't for want. I didn't have, nothing bad really happened. I mean, yeah, I had challenges in school, sports, that stuff, but I was, you just persevere and you overcome. And so a lot of it is probably not really thinking about the challenges I had because I was just so, I guess the way I was raised, my dad, kind of Japanese dad, we just suck it up and go. So you kind of don't even think about the challenges that you're going through, right? You really have to kind of sit back and really think about it and own up to it. But when you just go through it, you just go through it and you go, okay, it's all right. But there was one that just knocked me off my keister for sure. And I shared with you right before we went on was I was married to my childhood sweetheart. We met when I was 12 years old. She was 10 at a church camp. And we'd see each other once a year. She lived in Los Angeles. I lived in San Jose. So at 10, 12 years old, we couldn't really commute to see each other. so, so
Yeah.
we wait. So
Yeah,
we
you
just
can't really take a train or
yeah,
hitchhike for 6 hours down
yeah,
the
my dad
coast.
wasn't going to do that. But so once a year, we'd see each other at church camp. And then as we got older, we started kind of having these little summer romances at church camp, basically. But then I didn't see her after, once we got into high school, she stopped coming to church camp. And then I kind of lost touch, but we kept in touch by letters, like snail mail, not email, but snail mail, right? Back in the day, and the occasional phone calls. But she came up for my college graduation. And when she came up, we just kind of like hit it off, just rekindled everything. And we just decided to date. Let's go for it. Let's start dating. 3 years later, we got married and we were married for 5 years. And it was just like it's just kind of an amazing story. I never thought I would end up marrying her. But, you know, there's a whole story there. But, obviously just childhood sweetheart. And unfortunately, 5 years, actually almost 20 years ago, 5 days before Christmas, she was on her way to work in downtown LA. We're already down here in Pasadena at the time. And she kind of gets caught up in some slick roads, spun out, wrapped her forerunner wrapped around a light pole, and she just passed at the scene. So never had that chance to really say goodbye, other than the fact that I did say goodbye that morning. It was one of those. I always remember this. It was an interesting morning because I mean, not too unusual, other than the fact that it was her last day at work before she was going to be off for the break for Christmas. I was on my first day on the break, so I wasn't going to head. I headed out to golf, and she was going on to work. Um, we had tandem parking in our condo, so I had to pull out to let her out. So we hugged, we kissed, said goodbye, and then I remember getting in my car, and I was pulling back, and she was just still standing there looking at me and paused. I was like, and I almost stopped to say, "What? Did you need something?" But I just kept backing up, and then she got in her car and left. I just always remember that pause, and I was like, "That was odd. That was never happened before." But anyways, all it say is literally 10 minutes down the road, and they say statistically, that's when these accidents and fatal accidents happen. It's like within 5 miles from home. She gets in a car accident. I didn't find out till I got back from golf that evening. The coroner was waiting at the house to tell me the story or tell me what happened. So that threw me for a loop. Of course, it was just you don't see that one coming. She wasn't sick, obviously, and all that. So it was just I leave that morning, I come back, and all of a sudden she's gone. So of course I went through all the phases of grief within a few hours, and denial, anger, sadness, all that kind of stuff. And but I remember, you know, I just, I just remember like the next day. It was literally it was the next morning. The friends, some key friends that I grew up with in San Jose, they were at my front door that morning, and I just remember like, okay, now you know who your friends are, right?
Wow,
I
that's
mean,
neat. Yeah.
5 hour drive, literally a drop of a hat. Literally, I mean, they found out that the evening before, they all of a sudden the doorbell rings and there they are. And so, that was really cool, of course. And I remember, getting ready for the funeral, and I was writing out the eulogy. And I was just sitting there, and I was like, and I wasn't really following the Lord at that time, even though I was raised a pastor's kid, but I guess did the standard, prodigal son thing as a PK. But I just remember sitting there at this very desk, actually, and just typing out the eulogy. And I'm like, okay, Lord, they say, things happen for a reason and you have a better plan. So I said, better be really good. Because right now this
Right.
sucks. Because right now this sucks.
Right. You just
Um,
ended the movie short.
yeah,
So
exactly. I
what's
mean,
going on
we
here?
were planning, and part of the backstory too was her mom had passed away 2 years earlier, kind of unexpectedly. Her dad had prostate cancer, so we were expecting him to go, but he had went going before after her mom did. But he passed away 6 months before my wife got in a car accident. And my wife was kind of the caretaker of the family and really took care of some of the legal matters and all that. And literally all those things were tidied up. All the legal matters, financial matters are tidied up. And then she gets in this car accident. So it was just like, we were like, looking for the future. I mean, we were looking at the future because we're so concentrated on taking care of her dad when he was sick. I mean, literally he died in our place. And it was like, okay, now we can start to move forward again. And it was like that. And then all of a sudden, boom, this happens. So that, you know, and we always try to make sure we didn't take our marriage for granted. And we always were the type to have fun, even though we save for the future, but we wanted to have fun and enjoy life while we were young. Because I've heard so many stories about people waiting till they retire and then they get sick. So they work all this time to retirement, then to enjoy life in retirement, but then they get sick and they can't enjoy life.
Yeah.
Right. So we didn't want that to happen.
So
So
I
we,
sense a level of peace when you're sharing, and joy would be the two first words that come to mind
you know,
of your experience pre-living now, right?
mhm.
It, for anyone listening to the show who might be faced with a similar situation, or, you know, at the time it was on a pain scale, I'm sure it was 11 out of 10.
Mhm.
And yet now you're able to be okay with it. I guess the two things that I'm thinking about here is, one, in the time, how do you put one foot in front of the other? And like you said, I go through those phases because everybody goes through the
Oh
denial and
yeah.
anger and all of
Oh
that.
yeah.
But how'd you
Yeah.
get through it? And then how are you so at peace with everything now?
You know, I didn't really experience the anger so much. I mean, it was one of those things where well, I guess part of my benefit when I was grieving was the fact that I walked with my wife through her grieving process with her mom and her dad.
Mm.
So I started to see real time all the phases of grief, right? You hear about the phases of grief, and they're absolutely true, right? But the thing is, you just don't know when at what time that's going to happen. Um, so I was ready for those emotions. So that I think that was really helpful. Um, the other thing is what I just started sharing was we we didn't want to take our life for granted when we got married. And yeah, we had our ups and downs like most marriages do. But at the end of the day, I mean, we knew we were for each other, and we were going to live life as best we can and enjoy life while we had it. Even though we're being prudent financially and planning for the future, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're enjoying life now and enjoying each other. So I think that's what was part of what was comforting to me at that time, even in that first week. I was definitely, grieving. I was crying, my family's here, but I'm crying in the shower and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there was a level of peace because I knew I didn't have regrets. Like I said, our marriage wasn't perfect, but we did the things that we sought out to do. And we lived life and we enjoyed life and we enjoyed each other. And with that, I said, I don't have any regrets. I don't have any, oh, I wish we would have while she was alive.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's things that we were going to do later, but I mean, we only have so much time in a day in the year, right? But at the same time, we did what we wanted to do. The other thing was just, grieving. One things I learned with my wife grieving is you got to be able to talk about it. Some of the worst advice people give is keep yourself busy and take your mind off of it. Right? Worst advice ever, because you can you can bury your emotions, but those emotions are going to find its way up to the surface, but it's going to be in a way you can't control, in a way you don't even understand what it is. Why do you have this outburst with a customer or with an employee or a manager or whatever? These emotions will come out, but they're going to come out in ways you don't understand and you can't control, versus just let the emotions come out when they're coming out. When you feel the grief, just let it go. And I had some good people to talk to about that. I didn't have a counselor or anything, but I had some people that really cared and listened. And I never shied away from talking about the story, about talking what about happened. And yeah, it was painful, but the more I shared it, the easier it got.
Mhm.
And I was just at peace. Also, I was at peace with the pain, because I said, if I didn't love her, I wouldn't be hurting so bad, right? And so I just came at peace with the pain. It wasn't, I didn't try to avoid it. I just let it happen. And there'd be times I'm driving down a freeway, and literally it was like 8 months after the death, and I'm driving down the freeway and I just started crying uncontrollably. And I wasn't thinking about her consciously and all that, but it just happened. And so, of course, I knew what was going on. But all that to say was, one was, don't take life for granted with your spouse, and do as much as you can, and enjoy each other's company as much as you can while you can, because literally you hear the cliche, tomorrow's not guaranteed, and it's absolutely true. The next 10 minutes aren't guaranteed. And then grief, allow the grief to happen, otherwise it's going to come out in ways that are really destructive to you and other relationships
Mm.
around you.
What role does faith play in your journey, and how'd you get there?
Well, faith has always been huge. I mean, just growing up, I mean, my dad was a great dad, great pastor, and both him and my mom definitely ingrained God and faith into my life. So even when I strayed, I really didn't stray that far. It was really, I just wanted to see the other side and have a good time and party and stuff like that. But I never lost my faith in God, or who that God was real. And a big part of it is because when people have a real personal experience with the Lord, it never leaves you. And when I was 10 years old, when we first moved to San Jose, I had one of those Samuel moments where the Lord woke me up in the middle of the night, calling my name, audible voice, the whole 9 yards. I thought it was Samuel, thought it was Eli. I thought it was my mom calling me. So I actually woke up, went to my parents' bedroom, looked in the bedroom, and they're both fast asleep. And so I went back to bed. And then Lord woke me up, called my name. And I'm like, oh, I know the story. so, so I said, speak, Lord, for I'm listening. And so he just, I guess, gave me a download. I don't, unfortunately, I don't recall what he said exactly, because I had to note to self and also note to everybody else. When the Lord wakes you up in the middle of the night, get out of bed. Because I didn't get out of bed. I just kind of laid there still. And you know how you're still laying in bed, you just kind of fall back asleep. And then all I heard was like the Peanuts character voice, wah, 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 wah. So that's what I heard. But, I woke up next morning and told my mom, God spoke to me. God spoke to me. And, she didn't doubt me for a moment, just because of how I was beaming. And I just knew it, without a shadow of a doubt. So, having that experience, I just never doubted that God was real. Now, meeting my current wife, Kaylee, that's basically who brought me back to the Lord, as far as actually really starting to live it out. She was very adamant about it. It was interesting. She was, she knew I wasn't going to church at the time, but she knew my story. And so she just slowly started to kind of weave things in. Like as we started dating longer, she says, well, yeah, I really like it if you would pray at meal times. So I said, okay, I can do that. And then she says, well, if you're going to come out and visit me on a Sunday, it'd be nice if we went to my church. Okay, I can do that. So slowly but surely, she started kind of getting reeling back in. And then after we got married, we went to our church, went to Israel, and they announced the trip to Israel. And my wife was like, Kaylee's like, oh, I've always wanted to go to Israel. So I'm like, all right, let's go. And that was my rededication, and my first real, I think, acceptance of the Lord at the Jordan River, because we had a baptism at the Jordan River. And that was, when I was young and my dad did it, it was more an obligation than it was really my choice, sort of thing. But this was the first, this is me, this is my acknowledgement of the Lord and getting baptized. And from that point on, it just changed. And I always, even when I had my moments before I came back to the Lord, I always still lived my life very biblically. I knew the lines that you don't cross. And even in the corporate environment, I still kind of led by really biblical values and principles, even I wasn't really quite walking the Lord. So I knew those things are important and those things matter. And I also knew and I saw that it was very beneficial, not in just my own faith, but it was actually beneficial in my career and now my business. I taught for about 6 years a course on kingdom business at our church. And when I got this curriculum, I was like, yeah, exactly. This is exactly, how I saw in the corporate environment. I saw how even with these companies, and they're obviously not all Christians, and the CEO probably wasn't Christian, but I can see whenever things were going well with the company, they were living out biblical principles. And when things went south, they violated them.